I know.
We know you.
The English are gamblers by nature.
We will bet upon anything, anywhere, any state.
It is said wherever you go in England, no matter what the social class, we are gambling, that we would gamble on the weather.
And we will gamble across class lines. There are rules that are put into place in many of the games to protect those that do not have the money and allow them to gamble with those that do.
His Majesty the King is often fond of gambling with his servants at court, but he plays on such a level that they cannot be outbid by his much larger sum of money. That would be rude.
We adore a great number of games. But do we wish to talk sports first again?
Let's talk sports first so you can get that out of your system.
We adore sports.
Rough and tumble.
Aye, that they are.
There are very many sports that the English play which train us in times of battle.
Aye.
Primarily being archery. Yes.
Every Sunday.
There was a period of time in England in which the only sport allowed by the common people, yeomanry particularly and below, was the sport of archery. Because at a time of war, this meant that these people could then be called up and used in battle.
Not only is it allowed, it is encouraging. And so, you will often see on Sunday afternoons, if you were to walk into a town in England, after Mass, many men and women practicing archery.
And that is the point I would like to make to all of you that grew up in England at all, would have been made familiar with archery. Whether man or woman, young or old, would have been taught.
Every good English family owns a bow, at least one.
Now there are a number of other sports that have since become popular and are allowed. One of our favorites, cabbage. Cabbage is a sport brought to us by the Vikings.
Aye.
They played with a human head as a ball.
We're a little more civilized.
We used to play with a head of cabbage, and then a ball was fashioned that was stuffed and then sewn up with leather around it.
It is somewhat like a game of what will later be called rugby, except there are less rules.
And much more ground.
And a cross between rugby and soccer, because you do kick the ball an awful lot. You can kick the ball. Your goal is to get it from your end into a goal. Whether that goal is a pole, to touch the ball to the pole, whether it is between two poles, that is the goal. Whether it is in a bucket, the goal doesn't matter. They are laid out beforehand, and there are teams. Now there are very few rules in cabbage. One is no weapons on the field.
All right.
The other is no blood, no foul. Other than that, anything goes.
And when neighbouring towns were very adjacent to one another, it is common in our time for matches to run from one town to another.
You would have a goal in this town and a goal in this town, and try and get back and forth.
And in between streams and forests and plains, where terrible things might happen.
It is not unusual for men and women to become seriously injured. Bones are playing cabbage.
We should talk to Joan Humble here in our village.
Also, it's not untoward to hear games where there are multiple teams involved.
Aye.
I have played a game where there were 4 teams involved. Each of us had a goal in a corner.
I think you fell on me. You're very pleased. There is also a game that you might see played here this very day in Scarborough,
Oh yes, just
called
down
stool ball. In fact, there is usually a match in the morning in the Crown Meadow, and this is similar to what might be known as baseball in later years.
Or cricket. It is the precursor of both sports.
And you will see the good people of Scarborough playing. It involves a paddle or a bat of some kind, and a ball, and lots of chasing about, running and getting each other's way.
And throwing the ball at people.
Aye.
And again, it is a matter of touching the base. There is but one, and you must run yourself around the pitcher back to the base without getting hit with the ball.
And other than that, the rules are fairly flexible.
Again, you should speak to Lord Arlington in regard to the flexibility of said rules and the level of violence involved in the game.
You might notice our sports are rather rough and tumble. This is true. And as you rise through the social classes, that continues to be the case. For then
There are a number of other sports that are practiced by men, generally by men. These include the martial sports. At 10 and 30, at the Armory Cottage over here,
Village Armory,
you will often see gentlemen beating upon each other with wooden sticks. We call it bouting. This is a sport in which we are very pleased and proud. It is a martial sport. It is a game, but we are practicing for war. We are practicing martial arts. We also very much like to wrestle.
in the Greco-Roman style.
There is not a man in England who is not familiar with the rules of wrestling.
In a word of warning from personal experience, do not mention wrestling at the Field of Cloth of Gold in front of His Majesty the King. He did lose a match to the French King, but later did succeed in beating him at the jousting, so it was all met.
The nobles and the upper gentry transition very well from that, thank you. Also have a number of other martial sports that we are very fond of. These are the games that are played within the list. These are the tournaments, where we will have the sword tournament, where we will beat upon each other with swords. We will put armor on and we will beat upon each other with swords. And it is a point game.
Is it not fighting at barriers?
Fighting at barriers.
In the tournament in a ring.
Oh, I see.
Then you have fighting at barriers, which is where you place yourself in armor from the waist up, and you beat upon each other with pole axes. We beat upon each other a great deal.
Is that not generally done as a team?
Yes. Fighting at barriers. And of course there is the joust.
The joust is one of the sports of kings.
Aye, that it is.
My impression is that it's called that because only the kings can afford the armor.
Aye.
And
And
the
the
jousters, the jousters of your period, of our period, are the rock stars and celebrities of yours. Sir Nicholas Carew makes many a woman swoon.
Not for the fairness of his face, but for his skill in the lists.
For his
It's
prowess.
true.
Aye.
Sir
On a
Henry
horse.
Norris is no slouch.
No.
His
Neither
Majesty is outstanding in the list, and I have been there once or twice myself.
More than once or twice, Your Grace. The Viscount Rochefort also.
Indeed,
Oh yes.
indeed.
By the way, if we use the term lists, we are referring to a jousting field. When you hear that phrase, that is what it is mean.
Our list here is in the Fields of Albion, out near the South Bay.
I know.
Tell the rodents that way.
So there are a number of good sports that we use. We don't have time to do them except upon Sundays and special holidays.
They are.
When we have the opportunity, we use them greatly.
They are rather bloody, and if something should happen to you while undergoing these sports, well, oh well. Quite unfortunate that was.
Hunting, hawking, and fishing.
Fishing on an angle is
Yes.
my favorite
That is for
sport.
bloody amateurs.
Fishing on an angle. This is a fishing for sport. There are those that feed their families with it, but it is generally not the staple. It is generally done for leisure. And this is fishing from a pole. Hawking is actually a sport that a great many people take to advantage. This is hunting with a bird of prey. There are many commoners that actually have mews, then they have small goshawks and things of that nature. There is a very famous book called the Book of St. Albans that lists the different birds and which ones are appropriate to what social classes.
If you're an abbot, you should have this. If you are an earl, you should have that. Falconry is a very expensive hobby, and it is not one taken lightly because of the extreme care of the birds and also the expense of everything involved in caring and feeding for them and the various accessories that go along with it and so forth.
Hunting is extremely popular, but it is also one of those sports that one must be very careful with.
Aye.
Because there are certain animals that are considered the king's animals, and only the king and those who he gives permission to may hunt them. Then other animals are accessible to everyone.
We are fortunate in Scarborough because the Forest of Pickering, which is west of Scarborough, is open to the people of this area to hunt in.
And there is a good husbandman who is taken care of by our Lord Scarborough, who is in turn taken care of by the king, who tends to that royal forest for us so that we may hunt there.
And this is courtesy of our patrons, His Grace the Duke of Suffolk and the Lord of Rutland.
By the way, poaching, which is to hunt the king's animals without permission, is treason.
There was a time when they would cut off your hand in the days of Robin Hood. These days, you are either fined or you are made the steward of that forest. You have a new job. Congratulations.
You have to protect from all the other forest.
Right.
Now, it is your job to make sure that we do not run low on the beasts that are necessary to make this forest thrive and for those who surround it to survive.
Right.
So those are basically the sports that we enjoy, but we also love to gamble upon other things. Once the lights become a little dim and low, or for an afternoon of leisure,
Or any time we're trapped inside due to weather.
there are other things which we pass the time.
They say that if you give an Englishman a table in the evening, within a few moments there will be either gambling or drinking or both.
Usually poorly at both.
Nah, some would say so, your lordship.
Now, there are very many games enjoyed by all classes of the English. There are cards, there are dice, there are applications. We have a person here from
Eastwind Games is our game shop here at the festival, and he has some fine examples of what we would call knucklebones or dice. He also has some beautiful examples of German playing cards and some other simple games that we would enjoy, like Shut the Box, which is a very simple dice game and counting game. And it is an eternal game.
Alright, it goes on for bloody ever.
There are a number of variations on it. It is one of the oldest games that we play in England. It can either be done with a box or it can be done with a deck of cards. If you are playing the gambling version, it is to 45 points. That is called the penalty. The last person to get to the penalty is the one that wins the game. There are a number of variations. It dates back at least to the 1000s.
Another ancient game that we play is called Nine Men's Morris. Or if you're a member of the Seahole crew, we call it You Bastard.
basically it's a game where you have a board that is set apart by right angles with spots. And then you take turns placing one, and your goal is to keep your opponent from getting 3 in a row.
Sort of a strange cross between Mancala and Chinese checkers.
Yes, very much so.
Most of these games are available for sale at Eastwind Games. You can also look up in books and other places the rules of how to play these games as well.
Now the decks of cards that they carry, I believe you have a German deck and a French deck. Do you know?
I have French, I have English, and I have German.
Ah, very good. So we have the 3 decks. Most cards in our period were custom made. We did not generally have cards produced on a printing press at our period of time. They were generally custom decks. They were unique. They ranged from 48 cards. There was a German deck that was known for 48 cards. It did not have any 1s. It was 2s and ups. Then you had the 52 card decks, which most of us are familiar with. The rarest and the finest were the 56 card decks that had 4 face cards. A knave, a knight, a queen, and a king.
This time the French are the only ones to have a queen on their cards.
And currently, the more ornate the cards, the more expensive they are. So it is a show of wealth when you take a look at a man's cards, how well decorated they are. If you look at Master Markland's cards, all they have are the pips. If you look at His Grace's cards, they are a beautiful German deck. And as most of our art and most of our humor, they are pretty foul.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of pictures of things on playing cards in our time.
Also, the suits differ from card to card. There are some decks that will have acorns, swords,
Bells.
hearts, bells, cups.
The Swiss is my favorite. They have the bells, the acorns, the leaves. It's very woodland foresty sort of thing.
There are even some that are all floral decks.
I had a deck commissioned year last that was made up of the various nationalities.
Ah, yes.
The pips upon it were the house standards. The thistle for the Scottish, the Tudor rose for the English, the double eagle for the Germans, for the Imperials, and the salamander for the French. And those were the pips. I also had the 4 face cards.
For you, Arsenio.
Aye. For Granada.
The Spanish decks, wondrously enough, cups, plates, wands, and
What, they've eaten in Tristan spells in Spain?
what?
Swords.
Swords, yes.
Espada.
Yes. But it's the wands, it is the uncut wands, it is not the batons. The batons is more Italian in nature, I believe. In Spanish, it is the uncut wand.
Like a club.
Indeed. So we love our cards very much. We love our dice games.
games that are played with cards, there are very many. There are dozens and dozens of card games. There's a game that His Grace and I are very familiar with, which is called Bodays.
Aye.
There's Brag, which is a great card game, the precursor of poker. It can be played with 3, 4, 5, even 7 cards.
Floor, a good that we get from Spain. Floor is a very simple version of something you would call poker that is played with 24 cards, 1 to 6s.
If you wish to see any of these card or dice games played, many times after about 4 o'clock in the Captain's Pub of Congo, various members of us will gather about, play games, and you may play them with us.
Hazard is probably our favorite dice game.
Yes.
It is an extremely difficult game. It is very complicated. It is essentially our version of craps. And it is the game in which we absolutely adore to lose money.
It is a betting man's dream.
Let us not forget board games. One of my favorites is tables.
Aye.
It is the precursor to backgammon.
Also, there's drafts, which is your version of checkers.
And of course chess, which is a very ancient game and is still played in our time.
And there are many variations on chess.
Has dominoes arrived from Italy yet to England?
It has not arrived in England yet. We do not play it here. However, it is very popular in the Italies, as is tarocchi, which is actually where the tarot deck comes from. It comes from a game called tarocchi. It uses a very large card.
In England, our most popular board games are drafts, merrills, chess, and tables.
We also have this wonderful variation on chess called 4 Winds chess, which is played from the 4 corners of the board.
You see 4 Winds chess.
Very complicated. The rules for all the pieces change.
Yeah.
They have different movement styles when you move them to the corners.
It is a 4-player game, and it is played from the 4 corners of the board. Indeed.
Think of things this way. You, especially if you were born into the lower classes, work a very long, hard day. And you have but little leisure time during the week. But on Sundays, once you've been to Mass, you have the rest of the day to yourself. On fair days, you may have the day to yourself as well. We have not the entertainments of other times to come. And so we must find ways to keep ourselves amusing, to pass the time. And these are but some of them. There are many other handicrafts and other things as well that we do, dancing, music, all sorts of things. But these are our way of communicating, of telling stories, and also of enjoying ourselves in our free time.
It is one of the few ways that we have to socialise with those we do not know that is considered appropriate. If I were to sit down to a table at a game of cards in an open public house, and one of you came to sit at the table and I did not know you, it would be an opportunity for me to meet you without a formal introduction.
We have a lot of, as I said, we have rules for our games that allow the more common people that make less money to play with those that make a much more money themselves. Tongue-tied open it. One of these rules is something we call the stake. The stake is a predetermined value that is the maximum amount that one can bet. If we determine, and if I sit down with Owen Fisher for a game of cards, and he has 14 halfpennies in his purse, and I have a great deal more than that, we can determine that a stake is a halfpenny. If we determine the stake is a halfpenny, I cannot raise him to the point where he is out of the game. We must play with a halfpenny, and some games actually specify that you can only bet a single stake or 2 stakes per hand. Indeed. So this is one of the things that allows us to keep the game within bounds and within reach for those of lower station.
There are also courtly sports of a more gentle nature as well. What those who are born to the nobility like to play.
Like tennis.
I'm not sure that you would call the way we play tennis now gentle.
Aye. The tennis is a bit more rough and tumble, but it is very much a sport of our time. There's also handball, which is a previous older form that the older courtiers might be playing, but tennis has existed for some time. There is also bowls, which is a bit like lawn bowling. But
also available from Eastwind Games.
Aye. Heavily contested, these matches. Lots of arguing what goes on over them. And quoits, which is something like horseshoes as well. These are restricted by law only to the nobility class. We would be arrested or fined were we to play them, what are born in the lower classes.
Now the best thing about a game like this is you usually have 2 participants. However, I have been participating where I was not participating actively, but by gum, I was betting on the outcome of the game.
Aye.
Without a doubt, I have gotten too old to play the games of cabbage any longer. I am no longer able to keep up with Joan Umble and Master Arlington. It is fine. I will gladly sit on the side with Sachiko Oshima and place my bets all day long with our Master Mercer, and she is kind to me. In the sense of noblesse oblige, because she is a member of our gentle class, she makes sure that the bets never go above my head. We generally bet in barter because I do not carry coin.
And of course, and we'll talk more about drinking tomorrow, but drinking is one of our great pastimes as well.
Oh yes, and we'll bet on that as well.
Now we will. We English have a very good reputation as drinkers, so do the Scots and the Germans as well.
All right.
I just wanted to know if the common people are allowed to watch when the royalty play games.
Oh yes,
Absolutely.
allowed and encouraged. It shows us how strong they are.
Aye.
It is one of the few times in which we will be able to lay eyes on the entirety of the nobility at work. And as we have said previously, England is the king and the king is England. If the king is jousting, you can bet your bottom dollar every farmer in the region wants to look at his leg to see how his health is. Based on the king's health, I know what my crop will do.
That is the great spectator sport of our time.
Any other questions?
Jousting and so forth. Any other? None at all?
Problem of the day?
Aye.
All right, the problem of the day this day that we have heard, and this is tragic because it is next weekend, the king has cancelled May Day.
Oh.
Of course we know
May
this is
Day
a rumor, but it
celebration.
couldn't possibly be true.
That is the happiest day of the year, it is.
What will
Indeed.
we do if you remove one of the peasantry's finest holidays?
It's a lusty, rustic celebration of spring and
Spring and
fertility.
life.
Life and so forth.
Cannot be imagined with a king so newlywed that he would cancel May Day.
I heard it was the emperor.
Oh, did you know?
What was spreading this about to make the king look bad he was.
I bet he was.
Aye.
My lords and ladies, on the morrow we will be discussing feasting, drinking, and food. Something else we are rather fond of in England.
Yes.
Every country has its national sin at this time, and ours is gluttony. So we'll have a grand time doing that.
I will also discuss after our regular lesson with the ladies that are interested, construction of kitchen and plates.
So if there are no more questions,
Thank you all very much.
Very good, David.